My husband's ex convincingly made him believe I was pregnant with my stepfather's child, forcing him to demand a divorce or an abortion. Now, after 10 years, he wants to meet his child, but I have devastating news for him. My husband's ex deceived him into believing I was pregnant with my stepbrother's child, leaving me with an impossible choice: divorce or abortion. Now, a decade later, he wants to see his child, but I have some news he won't be expecting. Brittany, my husband's ex, masterfully manipulated him, planting the idea that I had been unfaithful, not just with anyone, but with my stepbrother Ethan. I would never betray him, let alone in such a vile way. But he refused to believe me, and I had no choice but to walk away. Now, out of nowhere, he wants to meet the child he thought wasn't his. For clarity, and to keep track of everyone involved, since I won't be using real names, here's who you need to know. Me, Jennifer, 35. My current husband, Javid, 38. My stepbrother, Ethan. My ex-husband, Tyler. Brittany, Tyler's ex-wife. Before I met him, likely in her 30s, my stepson, Spencer, and my stepfather, Steve. I'll do my best to keep this coherent, though this is a mix of venting, anxiety, and seeking advice. Even if you're just here to witness the disasters of strangers' lives, feel free to read along. I only hope I can do justice in summarizing one of the worst times of my life. Before diving too deep into the past, here's my current reality. After almost 10 years of silence, Tyler has resurfaced. He's been asking about me because he wants to see the child he abandoned. A single sentence doesn't capture the weight of this revelation, but as you keep reading, you will understand why this has turned my world upside down. When I was 24, my best friend and I packed up our lives and moved across the country to start fresh. 6 months in, she got her dream job back home. Of course, I encouraged her to take it, even though it left me alone in a new state. Just 2 weeks later, I met Tyler. I was overwhelmed by work and isolated, while he had just ended things with his high school girlfriend. The circumstances forged an intense connection between us. Within weeks, he was practically living in my apartment, and I was convinced he was the love of my life. He was in his final semester of college, having changed majors multiple times, and was preparing to work at his father's engineering firm, just half an hour outside the city. At the time, I thought I might have a future there too. Looking back, the cracks were there from the start. Hindsight always has a cruel clarity. When his graduation arrived, his mother showed up with Brittany, his ex. I smiled, introduced myself, and tried to make a good impression. Brittany wasn't just a past girlfriend, she was practically family. She had been the girl next door, the daughter of his mother's best friend. I was told that the day she and Tyler started dating was the happiest day of his mother's life. But I was young, hopelessly in love, and eager to be accepted. So I tolerated it. I sat beside her, made conversation, and did everything in my power to win over his mother. She never truly accepted me, but I kept trying anyway. From that day forward, Brittany became a constant presence in my life. Tyler insisted it was impossible to cut her out because their families were so deeply intertwined. So I bit my tongue and endured it. It didn't matter that she clung to his arm at every event or used pet names like they were still together. At the end of the night, we went home to our shared apartment and he told me he loved me. I believed him. He was simply trying to avoid hurting his family, right? I told myself I understood. After all, I loved my own family with all my heart. If keeping his mother happy meant keeping Brittany around, who was I to complain? 8 months into our relationship, he proposed. Only later did I realize he did it the same day he found out Brittany had a new boyfriend. At the time, though, I was blinded by love and thrilled to say yes, even though there was no ring. I assumed he was just too excited to wait for one. A year later, I was walking down the aisle, convinced I was about to live my happily ever after. Looking back, that wedding was the beginning of my biggest mistake. I hadn't seen my family in months, and suddenly they were all gathered in one place to celebrate me. It should have been a perfect day. I was so wrapped up in the moment, introducing Tyler to everyone, since, until then, the only family member he had met was my stepbrother Ethan, that I barely paid attention when Brittany arrived in a white dress. She danced with him as much as I did, but I brushed it off. I reasoned that Tyler was just celebrating with an old friend. After all, I had danced with my best friend and my stepbrother Ethan, the two people I trusted most besides Tyler. That was my fatal flaw throughout our marriage. I ignored the warning signs. I made excuses for him, especially when it came to Brittany. But looking back, that moment should have been a glaring red flag. For 2 years, I made excuses every time Tyler prioritized his ex-girlfriend, Brittany, whom he privately called obsessive and crazy, among other insults, when no one else could hear. I ignored every time his mother compared me to Brittany. I turned the other cheek every time Brittany made a snide remark disguised as a joke or helpful advice. At the end of the day, Tyler was all I had, right? All the friendships I had made in that city were related to him or us as a couple, and every family connection I had was through him. My family lived in another state, hours away, and Tyler was never willing to make that trip. He was all I had. Then, I got pregnant. To clarify, there was no abuse or anything like that, in a way that would have been easier to explain to my family and friends. What finally made me open my eyes and realize how much Brittany influenced his life was the fact that he truly believed I was pregnant with my stepbrother's child. Take a moment to process how absurd that is. Tyler genuinely thought that the baby I was carrying wasn't his, but that I had cheated on him with Ethan, my stepbrother. Since I lived in another city far from home, and our relationship before marriage hadn't been that long, Ethan and Tyler had only met once before the wedding, when Ethan visited me early in the relationship. The second time they met was at our wedding a year and a half after we got married. I flew back to my hometown to celebrate my mother's 60th birthday. Tyler didn't want to join me on that trip. A month later, I found out I was pregnant. I thought Tyler would be happy. He had always talked about wanting a big family with lots of children, and we had friends and family ready to support us. But instead of being happy, the first thing he said was, "She said this would happen." It's been almost 10 years, and I still remember it with total clarity. I was completely confused. The only explanation he gave me was, "She warned me, and I should have believed her." And instead of being happy, he left the apartment that same night and didn't answer any of my calls or messages. When he returned the next morning, he gave me two options: abort or divorce. To save you the details, when I finally managed to get him to explain what was happening, it turned out that Brittany had been filling his head with lies. Apparently, during our wedding, she convinced him that Ethan and I were behaving inappropriately for step-siblings, that we were too close, too affectionate. According to her, the way we hugged, how we posed in family photos, and how we spent time together at the reception were too intimate, almost romantic. She even told him that I had likely moved to our city because I was heartbroken after Ethan got a girlfriend. After our wedding, Brittany spent months filling Tyler's head with lies about Ethan and me. All she had were small fragments of our relationship that she saw on social media since Ethan lived in another state, but that didn't stop her. Then, when I traveled alone to see him and came back pregnant, that was all she needed to convince Tyler I was cheating. Naturally, I denied everything. None of the accusations Tyler believed because of Brittany were true. Ethan was practically like a twin brother to me. The accusation was not only absurd, but deeply offensive. But Tyler didn't care. He didn't care when I offered to take a paternity test. He didn't care when I showed him the medical reports indicating that I was already pregnant before I traveled. He didn't even care when I broke down in front of him begging him to come to his senses. It was a tough blow, but I couldn't ignore it. I packed my bags, requested a transfer at work, and went back home to my real family. All things considered, the divorce was relatively simple. Tyler's mother had insisted on signing a prenuptial agreement, and the lack of shared assets made the process quick. Tyler also refused any paternity test and thus signed a document relinquishing any rights to our unborn child. I hadn't heard from him since then, and now I find out he's looking for me and our son. My concerns are as follows. My current husband, David, knows very little about Tyler or how my previous relationship ended. He knows I was married and that it didn't end well, but that's it. It's only a matter of time before Tyler finds a way to contact me. What am I supposed to do when that happens? Maybe it's not as bad as I'm imagining, and if that's the case, don't hesitate to tell me, but I'm starting to panic a little. This is a chapter of my life I thought was completely closed, and I don't want to reopen it. Update 1. With the intention of not attracting more attention than I already have, I'll try to be even more vague with the details of this situation and of all the people involved. Maybe the word stalker is an exaggeration, given what has happened so far, which I admit hasn't been much. 2 days after an old friend warned me that my ex-husband Tyler was trying to contact me, I received follow requests on all my social media accounts. Although he hasn't sent me any messages yet because I haven't accepted any requests, I fear it won't be long before they start arriving. He's even been viewing my LinkedIn profile, which I can see because the platform shows who visited your profile. It's clear that he deliberately searched for me. I mustered up the strength and talked to my husband David about everything I mentioned in my previous post. I told him the whole story about my relationship with Tyler, about Brittany, about everything I endured from him and his family, and finally, about his reaction to my pregnancy. Fortunately, the man I'm married to today is 1,000 times better than my ex. He was understanding and gave me all his support as I recounted this never-ending story. When I finished, he was more concerned about finding a way to comfort me than about the fact that I had never told him this before. Of course, just at that moment, the follow requests intensified. We talked about what to do and decided to block all his accounts on every platform where he found me, which was basically all the ones I have. He had been stalking every corner of my online life. Luckily, all my accounts are private. I thought blocking him would give me some peace of mind, but then the messages started coming. He created fake accounts to send me private messages on almost every platform. In them, he said he had made a mistake, that he wanted to see me and meet his son. All the messages were different, but they ultimately said the same thing. He wasn't going to stop contacting me until I let him see his son. He insisted that the child deserved to know his real father, and that having a biological father was better than having a stepfather. He claimed that I couldn't understand it because, according to him, I had always thought that relationships with in-laws were the same as blood relations. The more I ignored him, the longer his messages became, insisting that he had the right to see his son. He wrote that he would keep creating new accounts and that I couldn't block him forever. I have no doubt that he will continue trying to contact me. I just hope that sending longer messages is the only way he escalates this situation. David has assured me that we are completely safe and that Tyler won't do anything really dangerous, but I have a bad feeling about all of this. Update 2. My ex-husband Tyler, whom I hadn't seen in nearly 10 years, showed up at my mom's door because I wasn't responding to his messages. I visit my mom every Saturday without fail, unless something important comes up. I always take Spencer with me, but since Friday night, he had slept over at a friend's house. This time, I went alone. In the morning, I didn't notice the car parked across the street, or the man sitting in the driver's seat, at least not until I parked in the driveway and got out of the car. That's when he also got out of his car and walked toward me. Understandably, I was shocked and afraid when I saw a man standing next to me, but when I recognized him, the fear didn't go away. He was outside my mom's house, a place he never visited during our marriage, a place he never bothered to go. His response? "What are you doing here?" It was the same as in his messages. He wanted to see his son. He had tracked me across the country, apparently finding the address through shipping records when I moved, just because he wanted to see his son, the same child he once believed wasn't his. I don't know if I was stupid or brave, but in that moment, fear left me, and I was overcome with rage. I didn't care that he had found my mother's address. I didn't care that we were in the middle of a neighborhood known for its nosy neighbors, and I didn't care that I was alone with him for the first time since our marriage ended. I yelled at him with everything I had inside me, throwing every single thing he had done during our relationship in his face. His only defense was that Brittany had manipulated him. He told me he was hurt and vulnerable and believed his lifelong friend. Apparently, this all started when Brittany almost got married a few months ago and finally confessed to him that she had been lying the entire time. The moment Tyler found out I had been pregnant with his child, he started looking for me. Thankfully, none of our mutual friends gave him my number, so he resorted to finding me online, and when I blocked him everywhere, he had no choice but to find me in person. He said he was desperate to see his child, but I had bad news for him. He didn't have a child. The stress of his accusations, the divorce, and moving across the country piled up, and just a few months after we separated, I lost the baby. The child he had given up on never came to be. Tyler didn't have a child. My son Spencer is David's son, my stepson, whom I adopted as my own. He has the same red hair as me and a personality just as intense because Tyler was right about one thing. For me, relationships with in-laws are just as valuable as blood relations. I have a child, but Tyler doesn't. By that point, I'd been yelling so loudly and for so long that my mother and Steve came out of the house, along with several curious neighbors. I don't know if it was the audience or the shock, but when Steve told Tyler it was best for him to leave, he left without arguing. Maybe I should have told him all of this from the beginning, instead of blocking him and ignoring his messages. But how could I have known he would show up here? I just hope that now that he knows the truth, he'll return to his life far away from me and my family. Update 3. Logically, I should have realized that it wouldn't be that easy to get rid of Tyler, not after he followed me across the country desperate to see a child who doesn't exist. To be honest, when I called him a stalker in the earlier updates, part of me was joking, trying to feel better about his sudden reappearance in my life. Yes, he had followed my every move on social media where I had an account, but there's a big difference between being a passive observer and becoming an active stalker. Again, apparently Tyler was more than willing to make that leap. I don't know why I thought he'd believe me when I told him Spencer wasn't his son. To be clear, he isn't. Spencer doesn't even have a biological connection to me, beyond my marriage to his father and my adoption of him. We don't share blood. The coincidence that we both have the same red hair was something David and I called destiny when I decided to adopt Spencer as my own. However, expecting Tyler to believe me when the main reason for our divorce was precisely that he refused to believe me was foolish on my part. Honestly, I don't know exactly what I expected from him. Maybe I thought he would simply accept what I told him and disappear forever, and that I'd never have to see him again. After that day at my mother's house, I started noticing his car everywhere. At first, I thought it was parked near my street, but it was only for a moment, so I assumed I was being paranoid. The second time I thought I saw his car, I mentioned it to David. From then on, we both started being more vigilant, and sure enough, his car kept appearing. Every time we noticed it, he would speed off before we could do anything. 2 weeks of that was enough for us to go to the police. We had taken some photos of his car in different places, mostly near my mother's house and ours. I thought surely the police would take seriously the fact that we were being watched and followed by my ex-husband, who was convinced that my child was his. Surely they would take some action? Apparently no. Although what we presented might seem suspicious, the police told us they couldn't arrest someone just for being near us. We had no proof that he intended to harm us, and he hadn't done anything directly against us. So, we're on our own in all of this. Update 4. After doing everything we could to convince the police to take preventive action without success, we finally managed to present the necessary evidence for him to be arrested. As I mentioned in my previous update, Tyler had been lingering around Spencer's school. The conclusion was clear. He wanted to take the child he believed was his, no matter what I wanted. Obviously, neither David nor I were going to let that happen. Fortunately, our neighbor, who was a teacher at Spencer's school, shared our concern. It was thanks to her that we managed to stay ahead of things. We knew that eventually Tyler was going to try something. We just had to wait. In the meantime, we informed the school staff about what was happening. We made it clear to everyone in the office that Spencer wasn't to leave the school with anyone except our neighbor, David, or me. A few days later, it happened. In the middle of the day, Tyler walked into the school office saying he was there to pick up Spencer on my behalf because there had been an emergency with his grandmother. He even mentioned my mother's name, probably thinking that would make him more believable. When the staff told him they would have to call me before releasing Spencer to him, he insisted that I was busy with the emergency and couldn't be disturbed. When he couldn't convince them, he pretended he would call me himself and left the building with that excuse. Of course, he never called. Instead, he sat in his car outside the school waiting. However, the school called me immediately to inform me of everything that had happened, just as we had planned. They also recorded the entire interaction on video. At the end of the school day, they released the students as usual, but they kept Spencer in his classroom with my neighbor. It was then that the police, with the video in hand, arrived to arrest Tyler while he was in his car. Inside the car, the police found 2 plane tickets to his home state, along with high-powered sedatives. They believe his plan was to use that medication on Spencer to take him away. Tyler was arrested and will remain in custody until his trial, where he will face charges of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, endangering a minor, and any other charges they may add. Finally, our nightmare is over. Update 5. Tyler is in prison. I won't detail every charge against him, as I don't want anyone tracing his real identity and, by extension, mine. What I can say is that he's facing several years behind bars, though I'd prefer it to be a lifetime sentence. The charges include the ones I previously mentioned, along with a few additional ones. Somehow, he managed to evade some, which baffles me, but as long as he remains locked away, I don't care. He tried to explain away the sedatives by claiming they were his, technically true, since he had a prescription. He had been taking them after learning the truth. Still, the plane tickets and everything else were deeply unsettling, making it clear what he had in mind. On top of that, We now have restraining orders against him for David, Spencer, and me. He will never be allowed near Spencer's school without being arrested on sight. During the trial, an official paternity test confirmed once and for all that Spencer is David's son. My medical records, submitted with my consent, also verified that I had suffered a miscarriage a few months after my separation from Tyler all those years ago. Tyler orchestrated all of this madness, only to end up in prison for absolutely nothing. And the cherry on top? Brittany. She showed up at the trial, putting on a dramatic display of heartbreak over Tyler's incarceration, conveniently just after her own husband publicly left her. Apparently, she had been constantly posting online in support of Tyler. In her final post, her husband publicly commented that she was welcome to go be with him in prison since she refused to stop obsessing over him. Friends from the city informed me that her divorce is already in motion. Naturally, I've blocked Brittany and all of Tyler's acquaintances from every platform I can think of, severing any possible connection to them. Update 6. Turns out, Brittany and Tyler were together, something many of you suspected, and I can't deny that I had my own suspicions as well. That's what nearly ended her marriage. I don't know when their affair started, before my marriage to Tyler, during, or after our divorce. But what's clear is that she had always wanted him back. The silver lining for her? Now she'll get to enjoy conjugal visits in prison without sneaking around behind her husband's back. Sure, it won't be as glamorous as meeting in a luxury hotel, but not everything in life can be perfect, right? The funniest part? I found out because Brittany had the audacity to email me. Yes, you read that right. She sent me a message brimming with insults and venom, trying to gloat that, in the end, she had won, because she successfully manipulated Tyler into being with her. I was tempted to reply and remind her that all she won was a pathetic loser, but I wanted to be the bigger person. That's a lie. I told her exactly that. And after hitting send, I blocked her. I imagine she fired off more rage-fueled emails, but thankfully, I won't be reading them. What a tragedy, huh? In the end, I could have taken the high road, but honestly, sometimes indulging in a little pettiness is the best form of therapy. Update 7. I just received news that I couldn't wait to share. Tyler got beaten up in prison. Don't worry, for those of you who might feel a sliver of sympathy for that poor soul, he's fine. But, as I've been told, inmates don't take kindly to men who attempt to kidnap children. So, he received a special welcome to make it clear exactly where he stands in the prison hierarchy. No matter how much he has tried to paint himself as the victim, the rules inside those walls are very different. His manipulation and superiority complex hold no weight there, and it looks like he's learning that the hard way.